Every year when I read this passage, it's interesting how something different sticks out to me, something new reveals itself. And this year when I first read it, I was really struck by just how many times there were people in the passage who were not ready to believe and trust Jesus. It starts in the beginning with the disciples saying, "We can't go back to Judea, they're going to stone us." And it ends with them doubting and saying, "Look, you can't open that tomb, there'll be a stench." And these are people who had seen personally all of Christ's miracles. They had been there for the wedding at Cana and seen the water become wine. They were in the boat when Jesus walked on water to them and calmed the sea. They had partaken of the food that fed 5,000. They had seen him heal blind men and lepers and people with all sorts of demonic possessions. And they had even seen him raise people from the dead in Jairus' daughter and the man from Nain. And despite all of this plethora of evidence that Jesus should be trusted and you should do whatever he says, they still doubted. But frankly, as troublesome as that is, I found it even more troubling, the doubt of Mary and Martha. They said, "Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died." And the reason this troubles me is because when I think throughout my life to the people who have lost their faith, it almost always starts with a question like this. Something has happened in their life, and they say, "God, where were you? I needed you, and you weren't there." And it starts a troubling journey. And beyond that, I've seen myself tempted towards this question. And when many of you have talked to me, you've talked about the times you've been tempted by this question. And so I think it is something that affects us all. And we need to be profoundly aware of it and do everything in our power to fight back. Because the short answer is that God is always with us. He never leaves our side. It is not, when things happen, it is not because God does not love us and does not care for us. There are only two reasons that bad things happen. The first is because of the sin of humanity. Sometimes it's a person, maybe somebody who commits a crime or does something unthinkable. Sometimes it's a collective thing where we as a society aren't doing what we need to protect the vulnerable. Sometimes it's ourselves damaging our own faith and our own life. After all, God did give us free will. And it's a great gift, but it is also a gift that leads us to sin. So the first reason there is suffering in this world and in our lives is because of the sin of mankind. And the second reason is because what happened is God's will. Now, actually, today's gospel is, relatively speaking, an easy version of that. Martha and Mary only had to wait 4 days to find out what that will was. Most of the time, we are not so lucky. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes we never know. Sometimes we are like Job, where he never found out that he was part of a cosmic battle between God and Satan. And he was an important player in the salvation of mankind. But God never told him. He never knew until he made it to heaven. And so it may be for us that things happen that don't seem to have meaning, and we will not know this side of heaven. Maybe sometimes we will know weeks, years down the road, but sometimes not. But these are the only two reasons that something negative will happen in our lives. And we just cannot take ourselves down the road of feeling that the reason that something negative has happened is because God did not care. And so my prayer for today is that when we are tempted to feel abandoned, we have the fortitude to rebuff that feeling. That we rebuke ourselves and say, no, that could not be it. And that we remember that God is always by our side.